After a tough work week, just like usual, I decided to head out of town. I've got my own cabin in the woods. I packed some groceries, threw them in the trunk, and hit the road. I arrived in the evening, got tired on the way, and immediately went to sleep. I fell asleep quickly and deeply. I was woken up by the car alarm going off. I thought maybe some small critter set it off. I looked out the window, made sure there were no thieves, and turned off that awful noise. I laid back down, and just as I was starting to drift off, the alarm went off again. Without getting up, I pressed the button, and it went silent. But after 5 minutes, the alarm blared again. All right, maybe once, okay, twice. But more than that, you start thinking something's wrong. Feeling a little uneasy, I finally got up, turned it off again. But instead of going back to bed, I started peering through the curtain to see who was messing around in the middle of the night. I observed, and then I see, by the light of a lantern in the bushes, someone's shadow starting to emerge. The shadow was getting closer to the car, revealing its shape, something skinny in a black cloak with a hood, about 2 meters tall, with long, thin arms, casually approached the car, tapped the wheel, and stepped back. At that moment, I realized it was time to get scared. Trembling with fear, I disabled the alarm and continued to watch. Something came out of the bushes, approached the gate, reached over it, and removed the barrier holding the gate doors shut. This creature was heading for the front door. I was paralyzed with fear. Who is this? What does it want from me? And why won't it leave? I couldn't move. Shivers ran up and down my spine, giving me a strong sense of unease. My mouth went dry, and panic started painting horrifying scenarios in my mind. Trying to find something to protect myself with, but then I froze. I froze because it was looking in the window, pressing its hands against the glass. It was trying to see if anyone was home. That's when it hit me. All those shenanigans with the car were meant to lure a victim outside. Why? I didn't want to know, but the fact remains, it's here, and it's looking for me. Its breath was fogging up the window. I couldn't tear my gaze away from its face. Ash-colored skin, covered in wrinkles, deep, tiny black eyes like beads, 2 holes instead of a nose. Its breath was so heavy and raspy that it felt like it was stealing the air. It had no lips, just 2 rows of sharp yellow teeth. I wasn't visible, as I was deep inside the house, but it wasn't about to just leave. Standing by the window, it moved to the door. Knock. Another knock. Through the gap under the door, I saw it trying to slip its fingers under the door. The doorknob started jerking up and down frantically. And the sounds, it didn't sound like a human voice. It was an animal growl. You know when you start taking a bone away from a dog, and it growls in anger. Something resembling those sounds, only meaner and more guttural, came from this creature. I knew that if it heard me, it wouldn't leave me in peace and would find a way inside the house. So I just lay on the stairs and waited for it to be over. Tears streamed down my face involuntarily, no matter how hard I tried to hold them back. My temples started pounding so hard that it felt like my soul was shaking. I blacked out. When I woke up, I immediately checked the door. The door was intact. I had never been so relieved. I got up from the stairs and looked out the window. It was already daylight, and the sun was fairly high in the sky. Without much thought, I went upstairs, grabbed my keys, and left without taking any of my belongings. Stepping outside, I saw its tracks on the ground, proof that I'm not crazy. The broken doorknob, scratches on the door, and pieces of the gate lying in the middle of the road all spoke to that. I hopped in the car and got the heck out of that town. On the way, I turned on the radio and heard that 2 girls' bodies were found in the area that morning. Their bodies were mutilated and dumped in a swamp. Turns out, it found what it was looking for after all. Have you met sick people in your life? Not those who carry this or that infection. With those for whom the psychiatric hospital cries, I just work in a psychiatric hospital. I talk to patients in order to find out if they are on the mend. In my life, I have met cannibals and rapists and even their victims, but this patient makes me doubt about his sanity. An ordinary teenage girl, 15 years old, studied well at school, helped her family, and took care of a stray dog. But the fact is that she killed her mother and denies it. At the trial, she was sentenced to compulsory treatment in our hospital. She hacked her mother to death with an axe and then tried to commit suicide. Then the story will go from her words. I loved my mother very much. She is very nice and kind, but lately it was not Mom, but something in her body. All my early childhood I was tormented by fear. I was afraid of the cellar in our house. Every night something came out to me and told me stories. When I was very young, I loved listening to his fairy tales, but then I began to be afraid. This creature began to torment me with its requests. At first they were easy, for example, to bring him a loaf of bread or a glass of milk to the cellar. And then it started. The first alarm call was 3 months ago. Then it asked to bring him a puppy. Supposedly he was bored in the cellar, and he wanted a little friend. When I brought him the count, apparently this is the name of the puppy. At night I heard the champing and not a single squeal of the dog. Then it asked me to go down to it at night, but I refused. She said that Mom would swear, because she didn't want to offend him. After that, it started howling at night and shouting my name in a terrible and demoniacal voice. It scared me a lot, and I decided to persuade my mother to move out of this house, but I did not succeed. It went quiet for a week, but it was the calm before the storm. On Sunday evening, my mother and I were sitting in front of the TV in the hall when suddenly my mother wanted to go down to the cellar. Without a word, she walked towards the ill-fated hatch. I grabbed her hand, but at that moment she looked at me with empty eyes. "Maria, come with me," she said in a demoniac voice, exactly the way it screamed at night. I started crying and started pulling my mom aside. Hysterically, I pulled her sleeve, and we fell to the floor. Mom looked at me again, and I saw life in her eyes. She was alive again. Mom was in a strange state for a long time. She then cried, then abruptly began to laugh hysterically. 2 days later, I woke up in a good mood, but I didn't find my mom in the next room. I went all over the house, but I didn't find her. I thought that Mom might have gone to visit. All day I sat in front of the TV and watched TV shows, but Mom didn't come in the evening. The clock showed 1 o'clock and I was worried. Since my entire route was from the kitchen to the room and vice versa, I didn't notice the open hatch to this damned cellar. I ran to him in tears. I started shouting to my mother, and in response I heard her call. She called me from the cellar, asked me to come down. My legs gave way from fear and I fell to the floor. I stopped screaming at her and crawled back. I experienced all the horror at the moment when my mother's head poked out of the cellar. Her face was lifeless. Pale skin, blue lips, and empty eye sockets. She abruptly jumped out of the cellar and started screaming in a strange voice. The voice of the creature that lived in our cellar. She rushed at me and grabbed the first thing that came to hand and hit her on the head. Only later did I realize it was an axe. After that, I cried over my mother's corpse for a long time, when suddenly it came out of the cellar. I looked into his eyes and fell into consciousness. I woke up only when my head was already in a noose, and 2 seconds later my mom's friend came into the house and cut the rope. From now on, I dream about it. It asks me to give it to you. It gets angry and asks you to let me go. Otherwise, it will come for you. Then she put a drawing in my hand. He was wearing a dark silhouette with white eyes. I was about to call the paramedics when suddenly she said,
"Do you have a cellar?"
All my childhood, I loved to come to the village. Clean air, endless expanses, freedom from the hustle and bustle of the city. Now my son is growing up. I am not working yet, and we have been happy to spend the summer in the village for 3 years in a row. I know every house, every nook and cranny, every path. You walk down the street and remember who lived here. You remember the names, the faces of smiling grandmothers. In general, nostalgia. 2 years ago, when I returned to the city, I found out that my grandmother had disappeared in our village. Drunk grandfather, drunk to the devil, beat her and pushed her out the door at night. I overslept and only remembered everything in the morning. I called the children. They came, started looking, called the police. In short, the search lasted 5 days and ended safely when the grandmother was found under a road bridge a few hundred meters from the village. She was crouched in a thin chemise and galoshes on her bare feet. Naturally, she was already dead for several days. She probably froze the first night. I've known these people all my life. I knew that this grandfather, Matthew's grandfather, was angrier than the devil himself, probably chasing his grandmother all his life. By the way, my grandmother's name was Catherine. She walked all the time with a humble smile on her face, never drove us. Unlike grandfather Matthew, he didn't even let anyone near the yard. But whether it was good or bad, they lived a long life together, raised children, grandchildren, and in the end, this is it. Well, in general, I found out all this then on the phone from a friend. I was sad, of course, and forgot. A year ago, in 2015, my son and I moved back to the village for the whole summer. My friend and her children also came there. There is not much entertainment in the village. One of them was a trip to the river to swim. The second was a trip to the ice cream shop. And so one day my friend and I go to the store with the children. We pass by the house of Matthew's grandfather. We look, and he is sitting on the bench. We said hello, and suddenly he asked me to come to him. It was so strange to hear him say anything other than swearing. Well, we approach. The legs will not fall off. And he grabs us by the hands, tries to put us next to him. Tears in his eyes, his voice breaks. One of them was a trip to the river to swim. The second was a trip to the ice at first. He smiled at the kids, kept repeating how bored he was alone in the house. The children rarely come. Only they will bring food, turn around and leave. And then, looking at one point, he began to talk without stopping, as if afraid that he would not have time to speak out. I will write on his behalf. I woke up one night, a couple of months after my wife's funeral, went out to the mailbox. It was cold. Hurried into the house. I pushed the door, and it seems to be closed from the other side. I tried to open it for a long time. Nothing happened. I feel my legs have become numb from the cold. I went to the neighbors, woke them up. They came, pushed, and the door is not locked. It's strange, but I didn't attach any importance. After some time, I began to wake up at night from the fact that it is very cold. Although the heating is working, I do not regret the gas, and my feet are freezing very much. Well, I think I got cold then. I'll go away, but it was not there. My legs were freezing, aching, and began to gradually refuse. Now I move only around the house with a wand, and now I crawl out on the bench. And that, girls, is not the worst thing. Once I just dozed off, I hear someone scratching at the door. Hobbled, I ask, "Who? What are you doing wandering around at night?" At first it was quiet outside the door, and then someone started moaning. He groans and scratches at the door again. I swore at the mischievous and went to bed. Everything was quiet for a couple of nights. Then it only gets worse. I'm sleeping, and through a dream I hear some kind of fuss in the kitchen. Got up, went out, turned on the light. No one. I was just about to leave when there were noises again. And I understand that they are from the basement. He turned on the flashlight, somehow bent down, put the candle into the darkness, hoping to see something. And then it began to blow on me so cold that I almost stopped breathing. And before the flashlight fell out of his numb hands, he managed to see some movement in the corner, as if someone was swarming the size of a child. For the first time in their lives, probably girls, it became scary. I've never been afraid of God or the devil, And here I was just numb with horror. I woke up on the floor. I was very cold. It was already getting light. I began to be a little afraid to stay at home. But where are you going with a wand? And even in winter, I'll turn on the TV for the whole. So the days pass, and at night comes fear. The first time I saw her was in the winter. There was a knock on the window. I got up. I thought, a neighbor. I look out. The light from the lantern illuminates well. I look. My Catherine is standing. He is facing the window, but he is not looking at me, but at the back of the room. And then, like something banging on the roof, I looked away for a second, and when I looked out the window again, she was gone. The next night she came again. I didn't sleep. I was lying down. I felt that she would come. Catherine knocked on the window. I looked out. Now, girls, she was looking at me. It was so scary, as if she was turning my soul inside out with her eyes. Then the knocking started on all the windows. And she just stood there and watched. I'm afraid to turn away, and I'm afraid to keep looking at her. And I haven't learned a single prayer in my whole life. Probably from the strong tension, my consciousness became clouded. I only felt that I was falling, and there was pain in my temple. I hit my head hard. In the morning, I somehow called my son, who, however, arrived, took him to the hospital. They kept me there for 10 days with a slight concussion. I slept there. It was so good, so not scary. When they came to write out, I kissed their hands, asked them to leave, even offered money. But my son came and took me home. I didn't even ask him. I know they will never forgive me. That same night she appeared, feisty, howling under the window, banging on the door. I didn't get up. I lay there and listened. And I still listen almost every night. Only now, I've started dreaming. She says that she is waiting for me, that I will not hide from her anywhere there, and how she will suck my blood to the last drop. Here, girls, I would like to die now. I'm very tired, but I'm also afraid to die. I'm afraid of her. In short, he talked for a long time, but we didn't even dare to move. And when he seemed to have dozed off, we got up quietly and left. My friend and I didn't say a word all the way. After that, we saw him almost every day on the same bench, but he no longer paid any attention to us. I know he's still alive. We are going to the village again soon. I hope to see him, and maybe even talk. I was woken up by the feeling that someone was looking at me. My friends were standing in front of me, staring. They were discussing something. I closed my eyes for a second. My head hurt like it was being squeezed with pliers. It was either from yesterday's drunkenness or from shame for my behavior under the influence of cursed vodka. When I opened my eyes, our whole company seemed to have evaporated. Thinking that I was dreaming, I decided that I would not drink anymore. I didn't want to get up terribly, but my dryness overcame me, and I went in search of water. We were drinking at my school friend's country house. The house was gorgeous, 2 floors, a spacious attic. There was a gazebo with a barbecue in the yard. I went downstairs. There was no one in the house. It seemed that no one had lived here for 10 years. The windowsills were covered with a thick layer of dust, and there was a spider web hanging on the floor lamp, next to a large sofa. Everything seemed gloomy. I went out into the yard. To my surprise, there was no one there either, and I felt uneasy. Where did everyone go? The car was parked outside the gate, and I was sure they hadn't left me here. Another stupid joke, very funny. I said as loudly as possible so that I could be heard. Come on, come out. The prank was a success. No one answered. I only heard my echo passing through the forest. Ah, fuck you, I thought, and went to the gazebo. The gazebo was large and cozy. There was a barbecue in one corner. In the opposite corner there was a small table, 5 chairs, skewers covered with a layer of fat, and various spices, and several empty bottles, talking about yesterday's drinking. Oh, a miracle! There was a half-empty bottle of mineral water under the table. I was thanking God. Practically, I drank the water in one gulp. The dried weed disappeared without a trace. The dull pain left my poor head. There was a strange taste in my mouth, as if I had just drunk a bottle of blood. I decided that it was all from yesterday. I sat down on a chair and thought about what to do. I looked around the house. My gaze fell on the window in the attic. My first thought is maybe they hid there. I went upstairs. The door opened with a terrible creak. I went in. In the far corner there were old boxes with things. Everything was still covered with dust and cobwebs. Peter's phone, my school friend, was lying on the windowsill. I was very surprised. The phone was glowing and making some sounds. I took the phone. It was playing a video. The quality was not very good and the screen was broken. But I recognized my friends, Peter, Robert, Stephanie, and Mark. I wasn't on the video, but I didn't shoot it either. I was scared. A lot of questions popped up in my head. Who shot the video? Why did he leave his phone here? The video continued. The recording was interrupted, but it immediately continued. I was horrified by the picture. All my friends were hanging in loops on a tree and dangling their legs. There were bags on their heads. There were tears in my eyes. I recognized the place. The video was shot near a hot lake. Dropping the phone, I picked up an axe in the yard and rushed to find my friends. I ran to the place. There were clothes lying near the lake, but there were no friends, no tree. I didn't know what to do. In despair, I returned to the house, and then I decided I was crazy. From afar, I saw that my friends were sitting in the gazebo. My eyes were watering, probably from happiness. I dropped the axe and ran to the gazebo. They were sitting with their backs to me. I started talking about what happened to me, but the guys didn't pay attention to me. I called out to them. They also ignored me. I took Stephanie by the shoulder and turned her around. I threw up. There were no eyeballs. Worms crawled in them. The whole face was covered in blood. The mouth was wide open. Half of the teeth were rotten. The other half was not there at all. There was no tongue either. I didn't want to look at the others. I rushed into the house, took the keys, ran to the car, and drove away. She went to the police, gave evidence. It's been 2 years. The killer was never found. Every 4th day of the month, I learned from the news about the brutal murders of 4 people. Their bodies were found in houses near lakes, and every month I receive in sums on my phone. Well done for sleeping. I was lying on the bed and couldn't sleep. It was well past midnight by the clock, but sleep never came. I had to go to school tomorrow and prepare for the test. But in the 9th grade, not all teenagers think about studying. Thinking about tomorrow, I began to gradually close my eyes and go deeper into sleep. When suddenly the phone rang. Startled by surprise and waking up at the same moment, I reached under the pillow. I took out my cell phone and looked at the screen. Already thinking normally, I saw that the number was undecided, and on the screen it was written, unknown. I picked up the phone. There was a moment's silence, and a hoarse female voice said, "Leave me alone." Confused, I dropped the call and threw everything off on made a mistake and went back to sleep. But a minute later the call was repeated. I was already feeling uneasy, and I turned off the phone. The strange woman was now calling constantly, both day and night. I couldn't stand it anymore, but I decided not to tell Mom. I added the number to the blacklist many times, but it was useless. Days passed. And so, once before going to bed, I received an SMS from this subscriber. "Don't peek." My stomach rumbled. I was scared. Night. Mom is at work. And then someone opens the front door. I thought it was Mom and pretended to be asleep. She came in and walked over to the bed. I opened my eyes, but all I saw was a shadow near the door. I almost died. This feeling cannot be described. I couldn't breathe. It feels like there was an otherworldly force in my room just now. It was cold and smelled of burning. And here's another text message. I told you not to peek. My heart almost jumped out. Hiding under the blanket, I quietly fell asleep. This girl never woke up again. An autumn rain is dripping over her grave now. After 3 days, a new text message from this creature came to her phone. Sorry, I got the wrong number. It happened last fall. Then October was rainy, as I remember now. The weather was nasty. The sun was already hiding, and my friends and I were walking around the city. And then I met my photographer friend. We generally began to talk about our work with him. The guys had already gone far. Well, I thought I'd just call them later and decide where to meet. We talked with him for a very long time, and then his friend came up to him. Saying hello, they offered me a walk to their mutual friend. We wandered almost to the edge of the city, private houses went, and then they tell me, "Wait here a minute, we'll go to a friend, it's fast." "Okay," I replied. I was standing, waiting, and then, out of nowhere, a heavy rain began to fall. I thought, what kind of luck? And where are these guys? I decided to go home. Since I didn't have the cell phone numbers of those guys, I turned around and just started walking through puddles because I was already soaked. Suddenly, someone called out to me, "Young man." I turned around, and near the nearest house, there was a woman standing on the threshold and waving her hand at me, showing me to approach her. And what the hell pulled me there? I can't understand until this time. I went to the fence, and she says to me, "Well, why did you get up there? Such a downpour. Quickly go into the house, otherwise you will catch a cold." The unknown woman said. Not seeing anything strange in this, I opened the gate and went into the house. Well, the woman didn't look like some kind of demon. Why not come in, warm up with warm tea, since it was already almost dark outside, and I was all wet. I went into her house, took off my jacket, and followed the woman. She looked cute. Her hair was gathered into a ball. In general, the simplest woman. We went into the hall, and then I saw some guy, about 20 years old, a young kid. He seemed very strange to me. I was sitting in a chair, and I was looking at one point. The woman went into the kitchen, and I stayed in the room with this guy. I'm sitting and trying to get warm. That woman is muttering something to herself in the kitchen. I can't make out anything. At this moment, a dog, a Rottweiler, runs into the room, grinning in my direction, all wet. Only from the street it looks like, and everything would be fine. Only the dog left bloody traces behind him. I didn't think much of it. Maybe she got hurt somewhere, I thought. I myself, in principle, am not a timid guy. It is not clear where this blood came from, so there was no point in panicking. The dog was looking at me, then its owner called out, "Rex, come here." And the dog immediately went to the kitchen. The guy was sitting and still looking at one point. There's a loud and heart-rending scream coming from the kitchen. Bitch, he knows. He knows why I called him. Catch him. Catch and kill. Then this guy abruptly gets up from his chair and starts walking in my direction. I started walking quietly with my back to the exit. I wanted to leave this place. Then I noticed his legs. He had hooves in the place of his feet. I just couldn't believe my eyes. I sometimes heard such stories, and I read them on the internet more than once, but I could never think that this would happen to me. This creature was walking in my direction and was yelling loudly. Just yelling, and that was it. It was probably like an intimidating effect of some kind. I don't know. I punched this guy in the face with all my might. He couldn't stand on his hooves and collapsed to the floor. I quickly ran to the door. This mad dog was racing after me. I ran like crazy through the whole house, slamming the door behind me. I found myself on the street. There was a heavy downpour, lightning, thunder. To my joy, I saw in the distance the guys who were standing at the house of their friend. Apparently, they thought that maybe I had not gone away for a long time. I ran up to them, using obscenities, told them that they needed to run. They looked at me like a fool, but when they saw that I was without shoes, They realized that I was not joking. The door opened behind me. A wild, loud scream was heard from there. The three of us rushed towards the city like crazy. When I got home, I immediately called the police. Of course, they didn't believe what I said. And no one went anywhere to investigate. After 3 days, the guy with whom we went to that house was found in his apartment. His throat was torn, his mouth was sewn up. When they took off the threads and opened the guy's mouth, there was a piece of horse meat lying there. They conducted an examination and said that a dog tore his throat. They don't want to believe in my story until today. At that time, my mother was still a student, studied far from home, lived in a dorm, and since the winter holidays came, she went home to her native village. The night before Christmas was approaching, and one of her friends suggested calling the spirit. The others supported her in this and quickly prepared everything that was needed. Lit candles. They are all sitting there, all serious, focused, and nothing, silence. They repeated it again and again, silence. They think, okay, let's try to call Bloody Mary. They repeated the ritual again and again, nothing. Only something creaked softly outside the window. In disappointed feelings, they decided to call the devil. And suddenly, at least with him, will ride. Calling, calling, and then it started. First, they heard snow crunching under the windows, as if someone was walking. Then someone was scratching the front door from the street and trying to open it. Then there was a knock on the window. Mom and her friends looked around and found that there was a black silhouette standing outside the window, not at all human. Everyone immediately jumped out of their seats with screams and screams, turned on the lights everywhere, and began to read prayers. Who knows what? A knock on the door, a crunch under the windows, some incomprehensible howl. All this stopped after 3 minutes and did not happen again, but no one dared to look out the window or open the door. And so everyone stayed here to spend the night. In the morning, leaving the house, Mom and her friends found horror. There were hoof prints at the door and in the snow under the windows. Mom's grandmother returned immediately, who was leaving for a friend's house for the night. The girls told her everything. They didn't understand why something couldn't get into the house. Grandma told them that she had recently invited a priest to light up the house and showed us a chalked cross over the door. Apparently because of him, the evil spirits did not enter the house. Since then, no one from that company has ever tried to summon spirits from the other world. I live alone with my sister. Mom moved in with her husband a couple of years ago. We have been living in this apartment for a long time, for more than 15 years. I must say right away, no one died in this apartment, and nothing supernatural happened. It was a normal winter day, January 21. Everything was absolutely as usual. I had a day off. My sister was currently unemployed. It was evening, about 22 o'clock in the evening. My sister went to a friend, but I decided to lie down in the bathroom. Lying means I'm not touching anyone. Suddenly, my cat rushed past the bathroom and ran into the room. Well, he's a little crazy. It was normal. I felt uneasy when he began to hiss, like cats hiss before a fight. I was lying down. The door was open, and I heard it all very well. I called him to me. Koteka came up after a while. The fur stood on end. Well, he lay down next to me. I closed the door because my sister was supposed to come soon. Suddenly, she would come with her friends, and I was lying here naked. 10 minutes have passed. I was thinking about something, and suddenly I heard a child's laughter from the room. Here I was in complete shock. How can this be? I'm lying numb. The cat is bristling again. Suddenly, the light in the bathroom turned off. It was on throughout the apartment. The light in the corridor was visible from under the door. It turned out that a year ago we made repairs in the bathroom and put a mirror with a backlight that worked from the outlet. Naturally, I got up and plugged in the socket. And what I saw, I still have nightmares. In front of me, in the mirror, there was a girl about 10 years old, with a disfigured face. It feels like she had been slashed with a very sharp blade. The eyes are all red, as if all the vessels burst at once. I jumped back, fell, and hit my head on the bathroom. I woke up in the hospital. My sister told me that when she came, I was lying in a bathtub full of blood. She called an ambulance and they took me here. The mirror was broken. She asked why I broke it, and I don't even know what to say to her. He will think that I hit my head hard and will send me to a psychologist. I said it. I didn't remember. Of course she didn't believe it, but we didn't return to this topic again. I just accidentally slipped and fell, hitting the bathroom. The cat is missing. The sister walked around the whole street, thought that he ran out somehow, but of course, they didn't find him. Since then, I don't stay at home alone. My heart won't survive this again. Maybe you had a feeling that you were not alone in the room, or that someone was watching you. So, you know, the paranormal exists. And if you're reading this, remember, when you're alone at home, no way, don't look in the mirrors, and don't look back if you feel that someone is looking at you. Maybe it's already standing behind you. Surely you have watched chilling horror films many times about how a family moved into a haunted mansion or worse. A hunt begins in their own house for the owner. I will not hide it. I like to tickle my nerves watching various kinds of horror movies, but I did not think that such things could happen to me. That's how I reasoned until my fate decided otherwise. I had to move from bustling Beaufort, South Carolina to a remote place called Savannah, Georgia. It was not my fascination with historical buildings, passages, and ruins that brought me here. Everything is much more prosaic. I met a young man named Alexander on the internet, and 6 months later he took me to live with him. And he lived in a huge 2-story house, and inside the smell of extreme old age. This house was inherited by Alexander from his grandfather, a well-known veterinarian, who died with his wife right in the house, refusing to treat the diseases that had overcome him. That's how the three of us got along. Me, Alexander, and our good-natured dog Austin. And while I was a housewife, I decided to put the house in order. Alexander never touched his grandfather's things, did not move the chairs, did not rearrange them. When he saw that I was dusting the mezzanine and shifting books, he got angry. Let's agree that you won't touch anything yet. The time will come. We will make repairs together and throw out the trash. Of course, I was offended because I wanted to please him. Oddly enough, I couldn't sleep that night. It was as if they were running along the roof with small steps and scratching with their claws, like birds. But where did such a number of them come from in the middle of the night? It seemed that someone had taken a bucket of millet or seeds and scattered them on the roof. For some reason, I suddenly felt uneasy. And then the dog began to bark excitedly. After waking Alexander up, I started telling him about what was happening on the roof, and he waved his hand, turned over, and fell asleep again. Everything went quiet as suddenly as it started, and I somehow dozed off. When I woke up, the first thing I did was go outside to look at the roof. I put a ladder, climbed up. I didn't find anything related to night sounds. There weren't even any traces of birds. When I went downstairs, I ran into a black, well-fed cat who brazenly looked at me and screamed heart-rendingly. Not paying attention to this, I went into the house. The next night, it all happened again. Small feet drummed on the roof again. When I came out of the bedroom, I saw the dog looking in the direction of my grandfather's former office. He didn't move. He didn't move even when I called him. He seemed to see something that was inaccessible to human vision. He did not answer my call. I looked out of the window facing the courtyard, and at the same moment I met the eyes of the same black cat. With a quick step, I headed back to the bedroom, crawled under the covers, and couldn't sleep all night. In the morning, I found that all the doors in the rooms and closets were open, and some books just fell off the shelves. I told my boyfriend everything. He did not take these fairy tales seriously. However, his mother, who came to visit us and was present at the conversation, told me an interesting story. She was not the only child in the family. There was also an older brother. His father devoted most of his free time to him, and not to his daughter. He took him to exhibitions, to horse races, and once brought him a little black kitten. My brother married a girl who was surrounded by notoriety. Gossip and rumors seemed to be innumerable. Among them were those who attributed to her a connection with evil spirits. Her brother brought her into the house, no matter how much her father resisted it. Soon after, my parents got cancer, and my brother died in a car accident. Unable to stand the grief, Alexander's grandmother died, followed by her grandfather, having driven out the hated daughter-in-law. Before that night again, and the same sounds again. And again Austin was singing excitedly, looking towards his grandfather's room. Gathering my willpower, I entered the office, which was terribly cold. The closet door was ajar. A thin white cloth was barely visible from it. I came closer. It was a wedding dress. Waking Alexander up, I demanded an explanation. It turned out that the dress belonged to Ariel, Uncle's wife. When she was accused of wanting to bring everyone to the grave and get an inheritance, she took her things and left the house, leaving only her dress. Before leaving, she cursed the mansion and everyone present. Grandfather, before his death, it seems, having fallen into insanity, strictly forbade to touch anything, and even more so to throw it out of the house. Alexander admitted that many times he was going to clean up and throw out old unnecessary things, but something always stopped him. The next morning, we burned the ill-fated dress. Surprisingly, it seemed to me that the house became brighter. The night terrors were no longer repeated. Austin stopped barking excitedly, and the black cat no longer caught my eye. We were 15 years old at the time. We were completely obsessed with mysticism. Our conversations were only about this. One day, after watching the ritual on the internet, we decided to call the Eyeless Jack. Then it was autumn holidays. We went to the nearest butcher shop to purchase an animal kidney. It was harder to get a medical scalpel, needle, and thread. Fortunately, Linda's mom worked as a nurse at the hospital. And that's when Linda came to her mom for work. She got the necessary things. We decided to hold the ritual in Linda's apartment. They chose the day when her parents were not at home. My mom easily let me spend the night with a friend. When it was already dark, we started our ritual. I had a strange feeling. It was scary. My heart was beating wildly in my chest. We drew a mask on the window. They left handprints in black paint on the windowsill. Between the prints, Linda dropped a drop of her own blood. We put the kidney in a plastic bag. Black paint was dripped on it. Linda noticed my anxiety. She tried to calm me down. She put the scalpel, thread, and needle on the bedside table that stood next to her bed. Near the package, I wrote in blue paint, "If you want more, follow the trail." Then I drew a line with black paint from the package to the bed. Now, according to the ritual, we had to go to bed. We didn't believe the ritual would work. We did it just for fun. We just wanted to tickle our nerves. At night, I heard a rustle. This indicated that the ritual was working. I wanted to take a look to check my guess, but according to the rules it can't be done. Otherwise it could all end badly for us. In the morning, we found that nothing had changed. The kidney was lying in the same place untouched. Medical supplies were also in their place. Well, you see, nothing happened. The window was only soiled in vain. Now we have to wash it. I helped her clean the room. I didn't attach much importance to the strange night sounds, referring to the fact that it seemed to me out of fear. We thought the ritual didn't work, but we were wrong. The next day, we went to school, as the holidays were already over. I was sitting at the same desk with Linda. There was a change. I was scribbling something in my notebook. "Tell me, did you have a dream today?" she asked. "No. And what?" "It's nothing." "So, let's talk." "Okay. I had a strange dream. I dreamed of Eyeless Jack." "It's time for someone to stop reading the creepypasta at night," I said without taking my eyes off the notebook. You listen to me. The dream is very strange. Well, tell me. I'm listening to you carefully. In my dream, I saw myself sleeping. Then I wake up and see Jack in front of me. He climbs onto my bed and starts pulling the covers off me. What about you? I was trying to hold the blanket. Anyway, he pulled it off me after all. Then he started taking off my t-shirt. My God, what are you dreaming about? Will you let me finish? Go on. Well, I naturally resist, but then he put a scalpel to my throat. Then I just froze. He pulled up my shirt and put a scalpel to my side. And at that moment I woke up. It's just your wild fantasy. Maybe. The next day, Linda came in covered in scratches. Where did you manage to do that? I asked. In a dream. What do you mean? I said, puzzled. In the direct. I dreamed about Jack again. This time I fought him. He tried to hurt me. When I woke up, my face, arms, legs, and body were scratched. And you think it's all because of the dream? Yes. Our ritual worked. Rita, I'm scared. At that moment, she looked like a madwoman. Linda, you're exaggerating a little. You could have scratched yourself in your sleep. No, I couldn't. It's him. He wants to kill me. You've already gone crazy with the creepypasta. No. Rita, please help me. I don't want to die, she said plaintively. You've already gone completely crazy. I shouted. Please. My parents haven't come back from a business trip yet. I am very scared to stay at home alone. Spend the night at my place. No. Leave me alone, you crazy. After that, I left. Naturally, I didn't believe her story. Linda has always been a little weird. At the age of 9, she wanted to cut out her tongue, but her parents prevented her from doing it. Although I, too, probably not quite normal, once I was carried away with her with everything mystical and engaged in calling all sorts of nastiness. But unlike my friend, I did not believe that this could really be a reality. We haven't spoken to her all day. After I got home, I did my homework. Then I spent the whole evening in front of the computer. When it was 11 o'clock in the evening, I went to bed. I had a nightmare. In my dream, I was in Linda's apartment. I went to her room, where we called Eyeless Jack. Linda was lying on the floor, covered in blood. She was in death throes. There was a guy sitting on her bed. He was eating something greedily. Looking closer, I realized that it was a human kidney. The guy turned his gaze in my direction. Black, merciless eyes stared straight at me. He stretched his mouth into a creepy smile. Then he got up and started coming towards me. I was numb with fear. He was already very close. I couldn't make a single sound. There was a feeling as if there was a lump in my throat. When he stretched out his hand to me, I screamed with all my might. At that moment, I woke up in my bed. I immediately jumped up, picked up my phone, and dialed Linda's number. She didn't pick up the phone. I tried to call her a few more times, but it was all in vain. The next day, I found out the terrible news. Linda died. Her parents found the body in her room. The floor was covered in blood. The examination showed that she died from pain shock. It also turned out that she was missing both kidneys. No one knew who killed her. No one but me. Even if I told the police everything, they wouldn't believe me anyway. I only survived because it wasn't my blood that was used in the ritual. I still blame myself for my friend's death. If I had believed her, I might have been able to save her. But what has been done cannot be returned. I dream about Linda every night, covered in blood and with terrible wounds. In a dream, she asks me for help. At first, I was afraid of these dreams. Then over time, I got used to it. Never mess with mysticism. It won't do you any good. My cousin from Jersey City came to Toronto with his girlfriend, mom, and our aunt. So I have two aunts, my cousin and his girlfriend. My cousin and girlfriend stayed at Airbnb during their trip, which lasted 3 nights and 4 days. My aunts stayed elsewhere. The house was located 3 minutes walk from my house in a quiet neighborhood close to a very busy street near downtown Scarborough in Toronto. Anyone who knows the area should be familiar with the pre-war and some post-war single-story houses with a basement surrounding the area. Small stone bungalows surrounded by large parks and greenery. The first night they invited me, my boyfriend, my brother and another cousin to drink, play, and chat. While they were collecting groceries for the evening, me, my cousin's girlfriend, and my brother were talking in the kitchen. I'm standing in the kitchen. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a man's leg, as if hovering in the air, as if halfway. My heart began to beat faster, because I knew that at that moment there were only 3 of us in the house. Just when I was about to say, "Did you guys see that?" the overhead lights started flashing and going out. My brother and I just looked at each other and started laughing nervously. I don't remember if I said anything about the leg then, because I didn't want to scare the girl who had to stay there overnight. It's worth noting that my brother seems to be sensitive to energies, I think without his knowledge. The night passes without further events, and we all leave early in the morning, except for my brother, who left home a little earlier. The next morning I bring them coffee and breakfast and spend a couple of hours with them. Despite the hot and bright sunny day, the house is cold and dark. It's so depressing that I can't be in it. I suggest we go sit on the porch, but my cousin and his girlfriend don't want to do it. My gaze keeps darting along the corridor between the kitchen and the bedroom, where I saw the ghost of a foot the night before. In fact, nothing is happening, but it was just a general feeling of anxiety and darkness. There were parts of the house that I didn't like, but again, I didn't want to scare them. The next day, the last day of their visit, they planned to visit the other side of the family, and then in the evening come and hang out with me and my boyfriend in our apartment. When they come, they seem sullen and withdrawn. It was different from our usual cheerful, carefree chatter and laughter. I asked them if they were okay, and they said yes, they were just tired. I tried to hang out with them, but they were so quiet and didn't respond to my extremely funny jokes. In the end, I said that if maybe they were tired of all the time spent with the family, and the thought of going back to Jersey in the morning made them even more tired, then we just can't hang out tonight, and I'll see them off tomorrow. It was then that my cousin asked me if I noticed anything wrong with the house. I immediately understood what he meant, but I asked what was going on. He said they didn't like the atmosphere of the house when they pulled up. His girlfriend noted that the area is very quiet, and there are not many people around. She particularly noted that she was afraid of overgrown lawns. There were none in this house, but there were in other houses in the neighborhood. They also said the house was very dark and seemed evil. They told me they never quarreled in their relationship, but every night they quarreled and quarreled, leaving them more and more tired when they came to visit family. The girl said that last night it was difficult for her to fall asleep, and she walked around the house in the dark for no reason. They were very nervous before spending their last night at home. My boyfriend and I told them they could spend the night with us and leave here for Jersey. They gratefully agreed, and around 2:30 a.m. I decided to go and help them pack, while my boyfriend stayed to pull out the sofa bed and prepare for their arrival. We get home, and everything seems so calm, both outside and inside. While they were packing their personal belongings, I stayed in the kitchen and disassembled the refrigerator. I didn't feel fear or irritation. I was just ready to help them get away from what was causing them so much suffering in this house. The girl comes into the kitchen to get her things, and then I hear a faint scream. I immediately turn to her and ask if she has heard it. She said no, but in my right ear it sounded exactly like a demogorgon screaming from Strange Things. Looks like a demon. I'm 100% sure of it. I know what I heard, and although it was weak, I was surprised that no one else heard it. If we explain further, it was like a scream from another dimension penetrating our own. It's like when you wake up from a dream but still hear something from a dream, if that makes sense. We get everything together and lock up the house for the last time. When we go out, I tell everyone who is there not to follow us, and they are not welcome where we are going. On the way home, we see a strange animal running across the street. It looked like a shaved deer or something, But at 3 in the morning, it was pretty scary to look at. My cousin felt that this was a sign that everything that had bothered them before had left them alone. I do not know what to think about it, but the images disturbed me. That morning, we don't sleep until 4 a.m., going through what we all went through. The guys come to the conclusion that someone there didn't like women, since my friend and I had the most experiences. She mentioned that on her first day on Airbnb, she tried to enter the house code many times. The door never opened for her, so she gave the code to my brother, who entered it, and the door opened immediately. This further reinforced our theory that women are a target for this energy. They left yesterday, and I'm so tired of everything we did last weekend, especially from home. I tried to investigate the house and the street, but no information appeared. At the moment, I don't think I'll ever know the history of this house, but I'm sure something happened there. It can be anything from murder or death on the site to the simple absorption of angry energy by the inhabitants of the house. I also feel obligated to say that I believe the fear my cousin and his girlfriend experienced was real. He works in law enforcement, and she works in the medical field, two professions that sometimes entail severe stress and life or death situations on a daily basis. When they told me they didn't want to spend another night there, I felt that the situation was quite extreme. Yesterday, I was talking to my brother, who told me that, in his opinion, someone is hiding in the house and watching them from the walls. He said the reason he kept leaving earlier was because he felt something didn't want him there. It was a very intense experience. At some point at night, my husband decided to walk near a small pond on the hotel grounds. Simply put, he wanted to go to the toilet. While minding his own business, he looked up and saw a man walking towards him along the edge of the pond. He clearly saw this man. He was walking with his head down, a red flannel shirt, jeans, and ordinary shoes. It seemed strange to my husband that some guy was walking by a pond outside the city in the middle of the night. So he decided to ask, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" He didn't get an answer, and the guy kept walking past him and was now looking away. And the next moment, he just disappeared. The husband ran to tell his friends about it. The guy whose relatives owned the territory was just shocked and immediately ran to wake up his uncle and aunt. They asked me to describe who my husband saw, and when they heard his story, they suddenly changed their faces. Then my aunt began to cry. It turned out that she saw this guy all the time, only right in the house. Sometimes he stood at the foot of their bed. But her husband never believed her. I didn't believe it, but I easily accused him of insanity. The guy's aunt was greatly relieved that someone else had seen this ghost, and her husband finally took her words seriously. That day, I was at a friend's house. Apparently, I then fell asleep right on the couch. When I woke up, I realized that it was time to go home. I got up, saw a light in a friend's room, but the door was closed. When I got to the door, I said I was leaving because I had to go to work early tomorrow. He replied, "Yeah, see you," and went to the refrigerator to get a drink. When I returned to the living room, I threw him, "See you later, dude," and he said, "Yes." Something seemed strange to me, not at all like my friend. So I went to the door, opened it, and there was no one there. There was no one in the house at all. When I went outside, I didn't even see his truck. I was scared as hell. I called him on his cell phone, and he said he left for McDonald's about 15 minutes ago. I ran outside and waited for him to come home. He told me that a child lived here many years ago. He hanged himself in the attic, and a friend constantly hears someone's voices and sees strange things. This was confirmed even by a neighbor. After that, almost everyone who stayed with a friend had this paranormal experience. Everyone told similar creepy stories, and my friend just got used to it already. At most, when it bothers him beyond measure, he shouts loudly, "Leave me alone." He says that, oddly enough, it helps, but not for long. Then everything starts all over again. When I was in college, I often went home to my hometown on weekends. One day, on another weekend, my friend decided to go with me, only she was going to go in her car. On Saturday evening, I had a very vivid dream. In it, a little girl came up to me and said, "Please, take care of my sister." And she showed me a photo of a car accident on the highway. There were two cars there, my friend's silver Corolla car and a black Ford Explorer. The next morning, I immediately called her, told her about this dream, and asked if she had a sister. That's why I only saw her brothers. Her answer stunned me. "Well, my mother once had a dead girl." I asked her how old she would be today, to which she replied, 5. I immediately linked this age with the girl from the dream and became even more worried. I assumed that it was her sister and persuaded her friend to go in my car. The next night, sitting at home in my hometown, I accidentally turned on the news, which showed a car accident. The same stretch of highway, but this time there was only that Ford. To be honest, it scares me to this day. When I was in the 10th grade, one night I was lying in our unfinished basement and watching TV. I got up and went to the unfinished bathroom in the basement, a concrete room with a toilet, sink, and mirror. Turning on the light, I saw a woman in a white nightgown in the mirror. Of course, I immediately ran away from there. I never saw him again. Simply put, the scary stories ended there. But a year later, when I was home alone, my friend Ben came to pick me up. Together, we were supposed to go for Christmas gifts. He had never been to my house before and had never met my parents. While I was getting ready, he was waiting for me in the living room, after which we left the house together. There is nothing unusual about this. At least that's what I thought. 3 weeks later, Ben accidentally mentioned that he met my mom in the living room. Of course, I replied that I was completely alone in the house that night. However, Ben continued to insist on the opposite. Allegedly, he saw her and even began to describe her. She was standing next to the piano in a white nightgown, and when I greeted her, she just silently left. That's when I got really scared. I was really scared.